for coming to watch this today. So my presentation is titled, "What's a Cataloger Like You Doing at a Service Desk Like This?" which is, again, not a typical thing, I think, in most places. So how my music cataloging job combined with public service desk duties and student supervision. So doing public service, but also being in charge of students and doing my own regular technical services work. So here we go. For the agenda for today, I wanted to give a little background about how I got here, right, doing this. And we'll talk about my first 2 years here as an NEH grant cataloger. And then we'll talk about my position change to a special collections cataloger for 18 years. And then as my current title, music catalog and metadata librarian, which I've had for 11 years. I'll talk about some of the student projects that we've done in the past and what we're doing now, and some of the pros of being a cataloger and public service desk music librarian, and of course the cons of that, and then just some final thoughts and considerations. There should be plenty of time for questions at the end, but if you have something that you really want to ask in the middle, that's fine too. So here we go. So I need to move the screen over a little bit for the where my information is for the background. So I was a graduate student in music history and library science with the combined program at UW-Milwaukee from 1990 to 93. And during that time, I worked in the Goldemeyer Library in a couple different areas. I started out in personnel, just doing whatever they needed me to do there. And then working in the reference library, just replacing pages and the tax stuff and the law pages and that kind of fun stuff. And then I was working 3 years in the music library as the grad student, one of the grad student supervisors there. And while I was there in the music library, I did all the typical service desk duties that most of us do in those kind of situations. But I also did some cataloging of LPs and OCLC because they had a lot of a backlog that hadn't been done yet. I did some cataloging of scores, but the majority of that was actually done in their technical services area. It was more to give me practice because our head librarian there, I was the only one taking the music library classes at the time, as well as being a worker. So she gave me some extra things to practice on. And of course, we did our in-house binding of scores there, like I think a lot of places do as well. I recorded materials for faculty for reserve on cassettes at the time, of course, and shelved materials and answered reference questions. And again, whatever else was typically needed to be done at the service desk. And then basically, I really wanted to be prepared for whatever job I might get in whatever capacity when I graduated, right? I wanted to be able to get a foot in the door. So I took extra classes on reference, in humanities. I took extra advanced cataloging classes just because I didn't know where I was going to end up. I did want to end up in an academic library, I thought, but I didn't know how long it would take to get in one. So yeah, I hope to do, both public and technical services work to be able to help patrons find materials. But again, not knowing what was going to be available, I was ready for anything. And at the time in 1993, when I graduated, there weren't very many jobs available in Wisconsin, where I grew up, public or academic libraries. And there was really only UW-Madison, UW-Milwaukee were the only academic institutions that had music collections, really, that were worth trying to get anything. I did do a summer internship at Oberlin in 1993 with Kathy Abermite, who was in charge at that time of their institutes and their instruction. And then I also worked at a bookstore for a year while applying for jobs all over Wisconsin, just, again, trying to get whatever I could and making some money in the meantime. And I did finally land an interview and got a job offer here at Bowling Green for an NEH grant funded cataloger position. It was a 2-year project of just cataloging popular music LPs. So again, I figured, well, I can get a foot in the door and see where it takes me. And so this is where I ended up. So I have my picture over there. So I began in December of 1994 after going through the interview process and basically, received on the job training for cataloging and authority work for this position. And then after I got here, I soon asked if I could take on additional evening supervision of desk students while I was still cataloging, because as a grant project, you still have to get the numbers and keep the cataloging going. You can't stop and do other things, right? So, but I was able to do some work and get some experience on the desk, and just to see what kind of things people were asking, and just to learn how things worked and what kind of questions we would get. And also just learning more about the collection too while I was doing that. And I could keep up the cataloging while I was at the desk because we did have OCLC on our service desk areas too. So I could keep working out there and not have to be at my own desk. So I learned as much as possible about the workings of the music library, the public service desk to prepare for a job hunt after the grant was going to be completed. Because again, not knowing where I might end up, I needed to be prepared to go wherever and wanted to get as much experience as possible. So in the meantime, I was also able to participate in NACO training. Our technical services area here at the time in 95 had a Library Congress rep come out and do the NACO training, and I got to be involved in that and the review process. And I later got into the music NACO NMP stuff and did my review with Ralph Papakian for that. But I actually had the most names to create for the popular music hours because we had personal names and corporate names, and a lot of the tech services people didn't have a lot of new names to add because a lot of the stuff they were doing was stuff that everyone else had already done. There wasn't a lot of original work being done, so it made more sense for me to bring examples for that particular project. But again, it gave me good experience and good training to get started. So the NEH grant position ended in 1996. So I needed to figure out where I was going to go next. The dean at BGSU in the libraries here was able to create a position called Special Collections Cataloger, which I was in for 18 years. And you can see I have a picture of, this is another office that I was in on a different floor. So they created the position based on some of the duties I was already doing, but also added some things for popular culture. And I was able to apply for the position. I had to go through the process just like normal. And I began in February 1997 as a tenure track faculty position then. So again, I was still doing cataloging, but I was still able to do service desk duties, but now I was able to do it in two places. I got to work in our Brown Popular Culture Library, which has lots of things like comics, fanzines, periodicals, story papers, romance novels, all kinds of things. And a lot of things that had not been cataloged before. And then I was also working part-time in the Music Library Sound Archives at the time, which is now the Music Library Bill Schurk Sound Archives. So I got to get a nice variety of materials in both places doing my cataloging, my technical services work. But I also got to do desk duty in both places. And that included, some evenings or weekends or weekdays as needed. Whenever students couldn't cover and the other staff members were not available, I would help to cover for that. And eventually I was also able to be the backup person for the service desk student supervisors in both places. I could help out with scheduling when need be. I was backup for payroll, the training, and any other projects that were needed for the students to work on. So I was already tied a little bit, and I was on the floors in the special collections doing technical service work, cataloging, but I was also doing the public service work in both areas. And so I already had the connection of the two things in my duties, which was, for me, I thought it was a great benefit. And I got to, again, see how patrons were asking for things and how I might use that to my cataloging skills. And you can see I had a nice big office here in pop culture on the 4th floor, and I have the extra desks there where the student would actually be working to help out with some of the projects, which I'll explain in a minute. So I was Special Collections Cataloger for 18 years before I get to the change of title later on here. So I was in 2 offices, and eventually I needed students to help with all the projects I was doing because I was doing a lot of different things, and I needed them to help maybe add barcodes to shelve things in the collections because the desk students were not able to come back and help me a whole lot. They needed to be out front. So I needed people to do add property stamps, write call numbers, any number of things, type up labels, all that kind of stuff. So I was able to hire 1 or 2 students at a time in the Popular Culture Library as I needed them over the years. And then I was also able to hire about 3 or 4 students in music for data entry and cataloging. They were typing into OCLC from a form. We would write out a form in the old version here and have the students type in the data, and then we review it and add the records in. But I also had to hire students, additional students to help type labels and add tail tape to things, property stamps, again, whatever other processing we needed to do before things would be on the shelves. Because again, the service desk students were not able to run around in the back and do stuff all the time. They needed to be out front. So I was already hiring student workers myself then and training them to do the work that I needed. So again, already tied together with the public service and then having the students working for me and doing projects. So you can tell by this picture on here, this is from the early 2000s. There's lots of 78s. So, previously, the desk students, were out at the desk doing the public service area, but we also had a lot of students doing separate work. Like one student in particular was assigned to type up labels for 78. So you see the stack of 78s on this picture here. That's just a small fraction of what we used to have. That was all they did for maybe 8 to 10 hours a week or something. And then other students would only do binding, or other students would only shelve materials in our offsite area where we have our backlog. They would be shelving 45s or shelving paper files that we had. So that was all they did for 8 or 10 hours each week that they were working. And so that was how it was done at that time, because we had so much stuff to do. And we had about 25 students working during that time frame. And the service desk students, we only had one at a time at our window. We had a window, and they were shelving materials and doing reserves and answering questions. But then we also had grad students or permanent staff helping with more in-depth reference questions, right? And they were at a separate desk. So we had the things separated by what people were doing and all the projects that were going on. And like I said, we had about 25 students at that time. And we were also open more hours, a lot longer hours too. We had even Saturday hours and evening hours till 10 for most nights. But during this time, I started asking some of the students at the service desk to assist with cataloging the CD collection with supervision by myself and review by our sound archivist at the time, Bill Schurk, because everything was still going through him for the sound archives, the popular music things. So some of the students were interested in doing that, and we had to get going on this because the administration wanted us to get this project, get CDs started and working on them. And so previously, our student supervisors that had been in charge of the students in both pop culture and music had been classified staff members during this time. And so whenever these people retired or left for other positions, I was always the backup person for that to help out in the interim until the next person was hired. And classified staff positions, again, are they don't have to have a library degree here, and they can they can replace them fairly easily, as far as they don't have to go through like a whole process that we do for faculty and a much longer interview process. So the student supervisors in the music library, we had significant turnover from 2005 to 2021. I went back and checked, and there was 9 different people in that position over that time. And they ranged from classified staff, which is what they mostly were to begin with, and then eventually switched it to administrative staff who actually were hired to help process collections and had to have a library degree. But most of the classified staff members that had been in the shop did not have music background necessarily. They might have had some, but they didn't necessarily have a music degree. And that was one of the things that we felt like we needed to have when you're out front doing questions and answering things. So as these people were either transferred in and out of the position and the duties were updated to work with the collections with the reference archivist, I was again always the backup for when they were on vacation or whenever that person would leave. So this sometimes made it hard to keep up with procedures and updates in student supervision. I was still doing my student workers for my processing and things, but the front desk students, I needed to keep up with more things for them because they were doing other stuff up front. So in comes 2013, and have another new office. This one actually with new furniture. In 2013, my title was changed to Music Catalog and Metadata Librarian, and that is my current title still, even though I've added duties to that. So originally, when I was hired as Special Collections Cataloger back in '97, the intent was that it was not going to be permanently between 2 floors. The intent was that I would be coming back to music permanently, but there was no plan or set date to do that. And over the years, there was so much stuff coming into both collections, I was needed in both places. So when this change came about, and it was just an administration change, they wanted me to be full-time in music, which I was happy to do. That was my degree, that was my background. So I took over cataloging all of the music materials, including scores and books and periodicals, which had previously been cataloged in our technical services area by non-music staff. So they might have been able to read music, but they were not trained musicians and not had the library degrees that, I had the experience with the other collections. I also continued cataloging though in sound archives. So I was doing all formats of recordings, fanzines, books, and scores, anything else that we had that was in the archives that needed to be done. I took care of all that as well. And then I also continued to work at the service desk, a couple of shifts a week, not as many. I did still do an evening for a while, and then eventually we had less hours, so I didn't have to do an evening shift. But again, it was all part of my job is doing technical service stuff and public service things as well. So I know this picture is a little dark, and actually it's very dark on my screen, but it has our current service desk and another desk, another area that we have our patrons at. This is from I think 2015 or 2013 maybe. So during this time we had a renovation of our service desk area, and we stopped hiring students to do just the one project. So they weren't just doing binding, they weren't doing just labels. We ended up moving them out to the out front and having the students out front do these projects. So this was 2013. So we had grads and undergrads. Again, they were answering reference questions and helping page materials. But in the meantime, I also started having them do projects. They started binding the scores at the desk or in the area near the desk. They would add property stamps, do title tape, barcoding, search for duplication, do inventories. Again, whatever we needed, we would have two students at a time working. So one could be at the desk and one could be doing other things elsewhere. And then they switch places if they need to. So this is another picture of our CD collection, or a bit of a backlog that we had. It's no longer a backlog. So again, our archive CD collection, the popular music stuff, had been continuing to grow faster than the sound archivist and myself could keep up in cataloging the collection. So again, we'd already had some students doing some cataloging, but we needed to really bump it up and get more done, right? This is the picture. This is about 5,000 CDs, I think, that we had at the time, but there had been a bigger backlog even before that. So we'd already whittled it down a certain amount by this point. So I had the service desk students, continue doing the CDs. Some of them were doing LPs as well for a few collections that we had to get done. But, we had reached a critical mass of the CDs by this point too. And so I actually had them start searching for duplicates because we found out we actually had some things multiple times. And again, a lot of these were donated to us. We didn't buy all these. So that was another reason we didn't know what we had unless we checked. And so we were trying to get rid of the duplication. And I was also checking for duplicates when I would catalog for copy cataloging, or after the students did original cataloging, I would check one more time before to make sure we didn't already have it in our own system, or that somebody else hadn't cataloged it since then. So this backlog is gone now. We have the 97,000 fully done. But we also, in the meantime, had another project come about from NEH from 2015 to 2018. We had signed up to catalog our 45 RPM discs, and the grant was to do 65,000 of them. We ended up doing the whole 211,000 of them, but not after the grant was over. We kept going, basically. But you can see here, everything in these white boxes in this picture that you can see, that's about a couple 145s in each box. And we had hundreds and hundreds of boxes like that. And so, like I said, we're talking 211,000 things. So we had to hire and train students to assist in this. And this is our room 100 space is what we call it. It's our additional space that we have on the first floor of the library. So we have our backlog of LPs here. We have our 45s here and some other unique collections down there as well. But I had, as you can see, there's multiple trucks there. I had about 20 students at various times each week working for about 3 or 4 years in a row. And so they each had their own truck. They each had their own section that they were working on in the 45s, or if they were doing the LP project, they worked on that. They were shelving. So again, it was a little bit tricky to supervise because I was not on the floor all the time, but we already, like I said, we were active in having the students do a lot of these projects. Some of them were just off-site. And in 2015, our student supervisor position was changed from a classified staff position to a reference archivist. And they had, again, as administrative staff, they had to have a MLIS and then also be able to process collections. So the reference archivist still maintain the student scheduling, the payroll, etc. But I was still the backup during this time. And our first reference archivist position and duties, they still didn't allow much time for them to do archival work. They were still too busy with the students and the scheduling and all the work that was involved with that. And so after our first archivist left in 2019, because it was kind of a stepping stone for her, it was her, she was ready to move on. We had another one in February 2020, and she was in the office for 1 month before the COVID-19 lockdown. So she left in April of 2021 because that was a bad time. So at the time, I was the interim head from 2019 to 2021. And then I was also doing my work. And then from April to November of 2021, I was also the student supervisor as well. So again, all tied together with my work already. And so when our new head librarian, Angela Portaser, who you'll see next in another presentation coming up, she came in November 2021. I said, why don't we switch those duties to me permanently? And it made the most sense because we were not sure even at that point if we were going to get the archivist position back. That once that person had left in April of 21, we didn't know if we could fill it again. Administration wise, we weren't sure. And I'd already been doing the work of training the students on projects under my purview, like the cataloging, searching, processing. So it made sense for me to continue to do this. And by this time, we had also cut some more of our hours. And so there was less materials on reserve for classes. There was less students, of course, that wasn't as busy after COVID, but we're still trying to get people, back in and distancing, right? So we were, trying not to add too many other things at that point. But yeah, it made more sense for me to keep going and take over the duties that I'd already been doing for a while. So here's what some of the projects that the students were doing and are doing still. So we have some LP searching on the left, or with the LPs with the flags in it. And then on the right-hand side, you can see all the boxes that have 45s in them this time. They're not so they're not from downstairs, but they are the 45s that were left that require original cataloging. And actually we've cleared out one whole shelf range of that and it's done already. So I have another project here that the students were doing. We have on the left the CDs that were part of the archives that were loose on the shelf. We had them in call number order by label name and number. So ADECAs, RCA Victors, everything in order that way. But we had a problem where we had to leave spaces all the time whenever we added a new thing. So our previous sound archivist or reference archivist in 2019 had come up with a plan to put them in boxes on the compact shelving. And so now, and we did accession numbers instead. So again, students were working on this. They could be doing it at the desk, take a box out, work on it, and then bring it back and put it away. So again, we came up with instructions and, it worked out fine that all the student supervisors could be doing this project and doing it while at the desk. And it also ended up saving us a lot of space. So some of our current projects too that we're doing right now, I have one of my grad students here. She's working on, we're doing, projects related to cataloging, labeling, processing, binding, and barcoding. So again, a lot of these things, when they're working on them, after they're done with them, they come back to me anyways. As the cataloger, I either have to fix something in the system or fix something and, for an error in the order of things, that they're not call number order, typos, whatever. So all the things that they were doing were coming back to me anyways as the cataloger. It related to my work the most. So again, it made the most sense to just have me be in charge of them. So what she's working on right now is searching those LPs for duplication. We're also looking for any typos that we might have in the system and making sure the things are in call number order. So the students put a flag in, I go ahead and check it, make sure it's all in order, and then I put it back down on the shelves until we can fully catalog some of these collections. And ever since Angela came, we actually have a lot more things for preservation that can be done as well in our binding. So here's one of our undergrads actually, who was really interested in doing a lot of the preservation type things that we had. So we can do more taping of scores and parts that come in, or when we get digital scores, we have to print them out and make them into booklets kind of thing. A lot of our collection had not been addressed for preservation before. There's a lot of things in the archives, as most people have archives, there's a lot of things that get ripped or just need some tender loving care, right? And so with Angela's expertise, we're able to have some student workers, if they have an interest and can do the skills, we will train them on how to do some extra binding and preservation duties. And a lot of them get a lot of satisfaction out of that. So it's been very helpful for us to get some of that work done because we don't have a preservation person on staff anymore in the library. And we seem to have the most preservation issues ourselves. So with the music type things that we all have, this was really good fit and it's been really helpful. And we're in the process of training our next student because this one is going to be graduating. I have another undergrad student here who is working on labels. She loves just coming in and fixing the labels, printing out the new ones. They're faded, maybe they're missing something's missing in the call number, or maybe they're out of order alphabetically, like the MAC, MC names. And when you get to those call numbers in the ranges, so she comes in, grabs a truck full of stuff. She's going orderly through the collection and call number order, and just relabeling things that look like they need a new label, asking me questions when they come up about if there's something wrong, or if something is found that's missing, that's not missing anymore. Again, these things all come back to me anyways as the cataloger. So again, it makes the most sense for them to do that work and bring it back to me. And we have students who are cataloging the 45s. So you can see this student she's got her own box of 45s and she's working in OCLC at the desk. And if she gets interrupted with the patron, she helps the patron and she comes back to her project and works on the cataloging. And I have another grad student here working on the periodicals that we're doing. So a lot of our periodicals had not been looked at or checked for a long time in their archives. And so he's making sure that the labels are good and there's no typos or numbering errors in Sierra, checking for condition, if there's anything that needs to be fixed preservation wise, and making sure everything's in alphabetical and chronological order as well. So again, I had all the necessary skills and the training to do the public service duties and along with my technical service duties. And I had organizational skills. I could answer questions, relabel things, send materials to the bindery, hire the students, evaluate them, train them. And so we were able to make the smooth transition with my moving my office from that back office back to the front. So I'm back in the front area where I was at the very beginning. And we're also able to reuse that archivist line in our special collections in general. So we're going to be hiring someone hopefully very soon. They'll be housed in our archives collection, but they'll be actually working they can work in any of the special collection units as needed. So that will be put to use in a different way. So the pros of being a cataloger and public service desk music librarian, I'm much more knowledgeable about what's happening in our area. I get to meet some of the faculty actually and be able to help them meet their needs, whether it's passing them on to Angela if they need to have her do something, or if they just want to request something, or just, if they're putting things on reserve. I use my music and library skills every day. I'm able to be more involved with decisions about what to do with materials and the collections. Like if we're going to weed or collect something or sending items to offsite storage, I can consult with Angela about we're tight in this area. What do we want to do? Somebody wants to buy something here, what do you want to get? I also have been able to gain a lot of control of our collections and make serious inroads on our cataloging backlogs using our students. We're also able to make the most of our student workers and their time in our unit. I don't know, we've had at least 8 or 9 students just in the past couple of years that are going on to library school after working here because they get a good idea of what things we do between seeing Angela's work and my work and the work that they're doing at the desk. They get a lot of knowledge about the collection that they're working with, and they gain knowledge about handling archival materials as well, because it's not just the open stack things they're handling. They get to do a variety of work each shift. So some of them are shelving, they're answering questions, obviously taking care of the patrons first and shelving materials, but they're also searching LPs, they're cataloging. Even if they're not good at it, I want them to, do something because it helps me out. They do shelf reading, they check for preservation, processing materials, binding. And again, they have a checklist of in what order they're supposed to do things. There are things that can be back burner versus things you have to do first, right? Some of the cons, it can be hard to get cataloging duties done when my public service stuff is busy, right? If we are busy with flooded with patrons or projects or students coming in for things. And as a faculty member, I do need to manage my faculty duties of meetings and research and committee work, that kind of thing, around my public service and technical service duties here in the unit. And sometimes I need to rely on other staff members to assist when I'm gone on vacation, make sure that the students are doing what they're supposed to be doing and the place is still up and running, right? And just some final thoughts. This particular situation of my mixing public and technical services duties works great at BGSU, but I know it might not work at other places, right? Due to considerations like your space that you're working in, the flexibility of your time and department staff, or your administration. And I've really loved being able to work with the public and see how my work as a cataloger affects our patrons. It's also made it easier for me to know how to find things for our patrons while I'm at the service desk, since I'm more familiar with where things are and how they're organized. And it gives me an idea of what I might want to change or look for later. And just my final thoughts and consideration here, I celebrated 30 years at BGSU in December of 2024. And just remember that cataloging is a public service, even if you aren't able to be at a public service desk. And for those of us who get to do both, it is a particular treat. So, do we have any questions? And I will stop sharing then if people don't need this.
Thank you, Patty. Awesome. I will go over to the question and answer. I like your quote, cataloging as a public service.
I think I got that from OCLC somewhere.
Perfect.
There's a button.
Okay, so this question is from Michelle Hahn. Could you say again what classification you were using for the CDs before switching to accession number?
Yeah, so we had a form, so it was CD is the form, format, and then the label name, so RCA Victor, DECA, whatever the label name was, the company, and then whatever the number that was associated with that. We stuck to that as close as we could, like Island Records 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever the number that was on the disc. We tried to stick to that as much as we could, and then we switched to accession number. Does that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Michelle, do you have a follow-up or is that good? And then we have a question from Sarah Cohen. How many students do you have on duty per hour?
So we have 2 students all throughout the day. Usually, once in a while, if somebody calls off sick, we'll get by with 1. So we're open, Mondays and Tuesdays, 8 in the morning till 8 at night. And there's always basically a reference person or a supervisor, whether it's undergrad or graduate supervisor, that's supposed to be able to answer the harder questions, right? They do chat, by the way, as well. And then the other student is there to help do paging, or, any one of them can answer questions, but typically the harder questions, if they get stuck, they need to ask the supervisor. And we're there usually as backup during the day, and they're supposed to be, the supervisors close at night and on the weekends, on Sundays. But yeah, basically it's 2 students at a time, and they don't always overlap, they're not all like 8 to 10, 10 to 12, it's whatever their schedule is. And so some of them, one's like 8 to 11, the other one could be 8 to 10, and then somebody else comes in. So they overlap differently depending on how their class schedules are for each semester. So it's always a different schedule each semester, but it's always 2 students at a time as much as we possibly can.
Thank you. We now have a question from Mark Scharf. With all the duties you have, how many different groups of colleagues doing similar supervision or work do you have to meet with or not?
So, you mean like other student supervisors? Yeah. So there's actually in the library, I saw him nod his head.
Okay, thanks.
So in the library, we actually have somebody in the dean's office is in charge. She does student employment. She's our contact with student employment. So when anything comes out from student employment, we go through her, and then she will often schedule meetings with all the student supervisors, whether they're classified staff, administrative staff, or faculty. I think one of the only faculty members that's in charge of students on a regular basis, but we'll meet maybe once a semester, or some of us will just get together in special collections and talk about our unique situations, because we do different things differently maybe than other supervisors, but we all try to exchange ideas though too about what kinds of work they're doing. And and people have actually taken some ideas from what I've been doing, having them work at the desk, right, and do projects. I've actually also started a new thing this past year where they were reviewing stuff every week, because I find that they forget how to do stuff, like check things out, or forget how to do interlibrary loans. So every week I have a different item that they're supposed to practice reviewing, and they practice with each other. And then so they're practicing checking out things, or they're practicing using a turntable. So some of my other colleagues are interested in looking at that as well. So I've brought that up to their attention, and that's kind of been a good feature. So, but yeah, there's student supervisors in the building, and we kind of get together every so often.
Thank you. So now there's a question from Ethan.
Mhm.
Having done both cataloging and public services work since the 90s, what
Mhm.
are the differences in how each has changed over the years? Has one changed more than the other?
Um, well, for me, technology has been a big change for both, actually, for both jobs, because technology has changed how much we can get stuff done and where we can do it. And now I can take stuff on my laptop and go home and do OCLC if I need to. So I think that's the biggest thing I would say, and that's actually for both, because even for public service, there's been a change in how people use the collections and what they do, and even like reserves, there's not as much of that on reserves anymore, and they use their Canvas for other things. The faculty do that differently, so they don't always have to come in here and do things. So it's one kind of goes with the other, but technology I think was the biggest thing, and how people are using the collections, I would say would be the biggest things I noticed in the 30 years.
Thank you. We now have a question from Deb Morris.
Mhm.
Budget has got to be a giant factor here, yes?
Yes. Yes, and we have to factor in, because minimum wage keeps going up in Ohio every year so far for the past, I don't know, 5, 6 years, maybe more years than that even. So we take into account, and again, because we've cut our hours again a little bit, we able to we actually manage with what they will approve our budgets every year so far. They've approved them with what we've asked for. And sometimes, we go a little bit under because people got sick and didn't show up all their shifts, that kind of thing, right? So we are able to make it work. But we do have to kind of plan ahead a little bit, because, we do our budget in July and the minimum wage goes up in January usually. So we're always trying to factor in, okay, how much can we get by with maybe not having as many students over break times? And we've cut down even on some of our holidays that we used to be open for half a day, and now we're not. So that has helped. And we have statistics saying, we're not getting used those days. Let's not maybe be open then. Or why are we paying students to work? Or why are we coming in if we don't need to have anybody here? And we've really not gotten any complaints that we're aware of from our College of Music people either. So, but the budget, yes, that is a factor, but we've managed to stick pretty close to it every year and not go exorbitantly over. So.
Awesome, thanks. This question is from Tom Pease. I didn't catch if the archive had a separate reference point, but if not, and if some of your formats circulate, do you check out magnetic media, or is it considered non-circulating?
So our archive stuff, well, there's only one service desk for everything. Our open stacks actually get checked out downstairs, but we do have CDs and DVDs that we check out at our service desk that do leave the building. They're mostly the classical stuff, right? But the archive stuff, it's all handled at our service desk. So if somebody is going to listen to something, we actually do check it out on Sierra, but it doesn't leave the floor. And so we don't do anything else with that. We help them put on the CD, or we play the record for them. So all that stuff stays here and does not actually go anywhere for the archives, whether it's print or other recording formats. Does that answer that? Okay.
Awesome. Another question from Mark Scharf.
Mhm.
Do any of the materials you collect have a local angle that requires special treatment or research? And what does that entail?
I mean, we have a lot of Ohio related stuff. Is that what you mean? Like local, Mark? Okay. Yeah, I mean, we have a number of things, and there are certain things in the archives. We have some old stuff too, right? We have some we have a vellum manuscript thing that we have. We have a locked cabinet for some more for either fragile or unique things that we don't want to just have out on the shelves. So we'll put book dummies, and so people know that if a student has to go get something, they'll know that it's somewhere else, and they have to ask for a key to get into it. One of us will get into it. But yeah, most of anything local, we may note of some of this stuff maybe, but otherwise it's freely available for people to come and use.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Not yet.
Okay.
We'll see. I do want to talk about buttons. I think you should see.
Oh yeah.
We use buttons all over the library at our service desks. Every service desk has a different button. One year we did stickers and the students just loved them.
We're doing stickers actually right now. We had our new sound archives librarian came up with this idea to do stickers, and so we have a bunch of those. So people will stop and grab those at the service desk. But yeah, I think when I evaluated my students, when I do evaluations with them, I've asked them, what do you like, or you're enjoying it, and a lot of them are out there telling their peers they love working here. They're trying to get them to come and work here because it's a great job. They have flexible hours. Most of them work about 10 hours. Some of the grads work maybe 12 to 15 if they want more. And then the summer they all work more hours. But they all like the variety of work, they've said, and I mean I think it really gives them a good idea of what library work is and what the collection is about too. Nothing else then?
No, I think the buttons are just going and going and going.
Oh, okay.
They want the button that says cataloging as a public service. Rebecca Belford put it in the chat. I think it's
Okay, all right, yep. I was gonna say I know I saw it somewhere.
All right. Thank you, Patty, so much for being our first presenter.